Para iniciar o conteúdo do nosso evento, é importante trazer um dado, e é um dado atualizado sobre a relação entre Brasil e Estados Unidos, a relação econômica entre os dois países. O comércio entre Brasil e Estados Unidos registrou um marco histórico no primeiro trimestre deste ano 2025. 20 bilhões de dólares em trocas comerciais. Esse é um dado da Câmara de Comércio Brasil-Estados Unidos. Isso dá a dimensão dessa relação que, apesar de muito sólida, histórica, passa por desafios diante do cenário global absolutamente novo e extremamente complexo. Para falar mais sobre essa relação, até então muito próspera para ambos os países, eu quero chamar ao palco Mauricio Claver-Carone. Ele é enviado especial do presidente Trump para a América Latina. E chamo também ao palco o secretário executivo do Ministério da Fazenda, Dario Durigan. A partir de agora, pessoal, eu vou arranhar um pouco meu inglês aqui, só para a gente colocar todos na conversa. Dario is our executive secretary of the Ministry of the Finance in Brazil, and Mauricio, he worked in the first administration of President Donald Trump. Now in the second administration, he's back as the special envoy to Latin America, and having both of them here to discuss the economic situation between Brazil and US, it's a privilege for us because we are great partners, Brazil and US. And to begin our conversation, I'd like to mention a recent data point from this study here, Asymmetries in Brazil-China Economic Relations, published by Instituto Esfera, the academic branch of Esfera Brasil. And here, let me highlight one analysis here. In the last 15 years, China has become Brazil's main trade and investment partner, but the economic relation remains strictly asymmetrical and risks in reinforcing dependency. It leads me to the question to Mauricio. Mauricio, at this moment, our President Lula, is in China. He's going to meet President Xi Jinping. I'm asking you, how this administration, Donald Trump's administration, what are the plans to strengthen the economic ties between Brazil and US? And how do you see this approach that China is making in our trade? Good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here with all of you and to see a lot of old friends. I want to thank, first of all, Joel, thank you for doing this and thank you for the invitation. Antonio, thank you so much. Also, my friend Pepe, Joesley, and then Dario here. We're actually friends. We're not foes, so we find a way to get along. So I think this is a good first step on how we can find ways to do things together. I think the one thing I take challenge to what you said originally is that yes, indeed, China has become the largest trading partner for Brazil, but the United States is still by far, first and foremost, the first source of foreign direct investment into Brazil, and I think that that's key. And I want to kind of keep it in that difference between investment and trade, because at the end of the day, I think that's the dichotomy that we lose in the rhetoric in regards to these trade issues. We lose focus on. You know, at the end of the day, President Trump has been very focused on investment here in the United States. And a lot of you who are here, a lot of you very sophisticated Brazilian business people, investors, have actually been investing here in the United States as well. And we thank you for that. And I think that's great. But part of the reason for that is because growth, which the United States has lagged for a long time, growth is measured in large degree by investment and percentage of GDP in investment. And that's somewhere where the United States has now been over the last few years historically at 20%, which then keeps economic growth at lower levels. The reason China's economy has grown so much is because actually its investment rate has been 40% internally. Now, the return on that investment is the poor, the level of debt has been high, and then therefore why all the issues that China is having today, which at the end of the day are not sustainable long term. But what we seek to do is increase that percentage of GDP from investment beyond 20%, where that's where we're going to see our economic growth go up 5% and over that, if possible, for at the end of the day, the most developed economy in the world. That takes us to Brazil. All of you who are here today, and I respect the fact, That's a big worry. As I respect the fact President Lula is in Brazil. I respect the fact this is his country. He can do whatever he wants. But at the end of the day, here you are in Brazil week, right here in New York. Because these are, oh, did I say something bad? Is that because I criticized? No. Right. But here, all of you are here in New York today. And why? Because New York is the largest capital markets in the world and the most important capital markets in the world. Because all of you are here investors. And frankly, I wish President Lula was right here. Now, Dario is awesome. I like him. And I think it's great that he's here represented. But all of you should be here because at the end of the day, the investment that you seek for Brazil's percentage of investment to GDP, which is 15%, part of that stagnation because you're focused on your trade surplus, and at the end of the day, trade surplus, fiscal surplus, etc. But at the end of the day, attracting the investment from the United States, you investing in your country, that's the magic formula. It's not brain science. That's the magic formula, and that's why President Trump, and you see every time, you know, he has these big like rollouts in the Oval Office. And by the way, I'm sorry I'm not wearing a suit. I decided when I promised the president I would be special envoy on a part-time voluntary basis because I have my own investment fund now. I said only place I will wear a suit is in the Oval Office because like I'm done wearing suits. I'm too old and I now have white hair on my beard. I don't want to do it anymore. So I apologize for that. But that being said, the importance of this all is that all of those people, when he comes up and he's presenting folks and he's talking about whether it's SoftBank, whether it's CMA, whoever it is that he's up there presenting as a big investor in the United States, and I've seen so many of you have done the same thing, that's what he's trying to do. And frankly, that's what we would love to see as U.S. investors as well in Brazil, because that's what's going to be the key to economic growth. You guys are investing in us, we're investing in you. At the end of the day, we want to remain that. You know, look, commodities, we're never going to agree. The reason why, and at one point when I was at the White House, in the first term, we worked really hard to figure out, okay, can we do a free trade agreement with Brazil? And sorry, I talk too much, but I'll shut up here. Can we do a free trade agreement with Brazil? But the problem is that we have complementary economies. And that's going to be the issue now and the challenge that you're going to have because Brazil could be flying high and mighty right now with its trade surplus. But the problem that you're going to face, which is why kind of the plane needs to land, is that when there is a deal with China, because there will be a deal with China, like there was the first term, just look at what the deal was about. It involved soy, it involved wheat, it involved cow, it involved a lot of the same commodities that you guys compete with. And at the end of the day, China's purchases are zero sum. So that's why that diversification is so important. That's why we want to support you in that diversification. And this is not about politics, it's not about ideology. This is about how we can grow together because we are the two largest economies in the Americas.
But just to be clear, what Brazil has to do to receive more investments from the US?
Brazil faces three problems, and I'm going to say them in this order. And if you ask any investor here in New York, and I literally, when I created my fund, I literally talked to every major investment fund. And I said, what are you doing in Latin America? And they said, nothing except Brazil. We were Brazil, and then we got out. Why? And I call them the 3 C's. But it's the first one that is really the toughest. Currency. I just had a major CEO said, hey, we just sold our last asset in Brazil. Why? Currency risk. We can't take the currency risk. And we got to keep hedging. It's expensive. It's not worth it. I don't have the solution for you. That's why Dario gets paid the big bucks. And you guys got to figure out how to deal with that. But at the end of the day, I'm just being honest with you. The biggest challenge that investors, and I am one of them, have with Brazil is currency risk. We like dollar deals. We like dollarized countries. I'm not asking you to dollarize. I'm just saying it's a problem. So we have to figure out and hedging becomes expensive. So that's number one. And then second and third, and this is where we can have the best cooperation, the second C is crime. And we can work closely with that. And we're fully committed in this administration, and we're working really closely with the Brazilian government how to deal with the organized crime problem. That's a big deal. PCC, TB, etc. We're working We're working very closely with the current government to make sure that we address that. And then the third, is kind of like the overall, and we've tried to like walk down that myth, but still there's the myth, not the myth, but the reality that becomes a big myth of corruption. So currency, crime, corruption. And I think obviously we've come a long way in long days from the Odebrecht days, and I think that history is behind. And I think that's waned, and I think that now here people see and understand the quality of Brazilian investors, the quality of Brazilian country, the fact that, I mean, you are a top 10 economy. You are the second largest economy in the Western Hemisphere. If you ask most people, if you ask anybody here in New York, what is the second largest economy after the United States in the Americas? I bet you 99% of people will say Canada. And the second choice after that is probably Mexico. I bet you 1% of the people, of investors here, sophisticated people, will tell you that the second largest economy in the Americas is Brazil. That's a problem. We need to work through that. And I think there's a great opportunity. Look, Brazil should be your first world country. It will be if it can deal with those issues. You have a currency problem, you have a crime problem, and I'm very optimistic. I mean, it's come a long way on the corruption front, and I think that we can work together in there.
Mauricio Claver-Carone, Special Envoy to Latin America. Thank you very much. And I can say here, what a great opportunity to have Mr. Durigan, Dario Durigan, to complement the answer of Mr. Mauricio. Please, Dario. One minute. Yes.
Let me just start saying hi to Mauricio. We met here at the table. It's a great opportunity to be here with Mauricio and Brazilian leaderships from business, from politics, from government. I think to be clear, it is important for us to say that from our perspective, from Brazilian government perspective, we are not automatically aligning with anyone. So we are not aligning with China. This is bullshit. This is not one thing that's correct to say. We are not automatically aligning with the United States according to what any government of the United States want from us or Europe. As Mauricio has said, we have our own problems and we have our own interests to protect in Brazil. So the first thing to do is not to be worried about what other countries think of us, of what other countries want us to do. We have our own priorities and we have to work through their priorities. So I think this is one thing that's really important for everyone to recognize and to see what we are working from the Brazilian current government perspective. So we are working with the United States. Minister Haddad was with Scott Bessent last week. It was a good conversation when Haddad said to Scott Bessent, so you were saying that you run a deficit transaction balance with China, and this is why you are raising your import tax. So this is, if you consider the premise, that is not correct regarding Brazil and Latin America, because we run the deficit transaction. So are we being punished about running deficit transactions? So we import more goods and services from the US than the opposite. So we run the deficit. We should consider that when we open the negotiations, when we open the table. And of course, we understand and we respect that there are priorities. So the United States is leading, which is addressing China and addressing the UK. When it comes to Brazil, it would be really important to share those numbers. From our perspective as well, we are receiving a lot of contact from Europe, from Middle East, from countries outside of the European Union that wants to meet with us and wants to advance on free trade, on free treaties with us. And we are very open to that. I'm talking to the UK. They want to review the agreement that we have on tax with the UK. We advanced with the Mercosur and the European Union in order to have equal and justice commerce between the two blocks. And we are also talking to China. China buy a lot of the agro commodities from Brazil, and it's really important for us to keep that commerce flowing. So to address what Mauricio has said, what we should defend in Brazil is our own interests of the country, being industry, being agro, being commerce. And we started doing that in a very balanced way. So Haddad is meeting, has met with Scott Besson. I'm meeting with Scott Besson's team. And we are going to develop that relationship because, as Mauricio said, we recognize that the United States is the oldest investor, the companies of the United States. We're the oldest. When we see investments in Brazil, this is true. We have a long relationship with the United States, and we all recognize that. Everyone here who knows the history of Brazil, or the histories of investments in Brazil, knows that. And when we discuss with China, the first thing we put on the table with them, we don't want you to sell your cars here in Brazil. If you want to sell anything in Brazil, you should come in fact to Brazil. Build stuff here, bring technology to Brazil. Not just make up anything here to try to sell things here. So we are going to defend Brazilian interests, being Brazilian business, being Brazilian citizens. And that's one thing that we do, and I think the United States is doing that as well. But we have our own way to do the politics in Brazil.
Just to finish, do you think it's important for President Lula to be here, to visit President Trump? When this is gonna happen?
Of course, I think Lula in international relations is too big to not meet Trump or to not open himself this relationship with the U.S. We are doing that. Minister Haddad was with his peer, the Secretary of Treasury of the United States, and I'm at the disposal of his team. I'm talking with Dan Katz, just mentioned to Mauricio, and it's really important for us to show that we are very pragmatic, that we are capitalists, that we want free market, that we want the best solutions from market in Brazil, but we also need to protect the country with all the Chinese threats, American threats, European threats. So, and I think this is part of the game that we should consider. In any case.
What important debate. Thank you very much, Mr. Carone, Mr. Durigan. And please, I'll call now Camilo Funaro to hand the study. É isso, pessoal. A partir de agora, eu deixo vocês à vontade com o jantar e com os contatos que vocês certamente vão fazer e quem sabe conversar mais com o Sr. Carone, o Sr. Durigan, para entender um pouco mais como está a relação Brasil e Estados Unidos. Espero que tenham gostado desse papo rápido, mas extremamente construtivo. Esse evento não acaba aqui, ainda vamos repercutir muito o que vai ser notícia, o que vai ser conversado aqui. Não deixem de seguir a Esfera, Esfera Brasil e o Instituto Esfera nas redes sociais, @EsferaBR e @instituto.esfera. Tenham todos uma ótima noite e aproveitem essa Brazilian Week nos eventos desta semana. Boa noite, muito obrigado.